one of the greatest fights in all gaming. The most memorable boss duo, the ultimate guardians, Dragon Slayer Ornstein and Executioner Smough. This fight has already gone down in gaming's history as an example on how to design duo boss fight. When the gods fled Anor Londo, they have left behind Gwyn's very own daughter, goddess Guinevere. Ornstein and Smough were chosen as her guardians. Dragon Slayer Ornstein, one of the 4 bravest knights in all Lordran. He fought violently alongside Lord Gwyn during the war with everlasting dragons. His lightning-infused armor and unique spear gave him an advantage over ancient beasts. It is well known that after the war ended, Lord Gwyn took a piece of his own Lord's soul and divided it into 4 pieces, granting each piece to one of his 4 bravest knights. Smough, however, was a royal executioner. His victims were eaten by him, thus his enormous size. He always wished to join the 4 knights, but because of his cruelty, Gwyn never granted him this honor, and now he fights along the legendary Ornstein. When player enters the fog gate, the Smough is already waiting at the end of the hall. He demonstrates his enormous hammer with great pride. Then Ornstein shows up on the balcony. He jumps down and the fight begins. This is probably the most complex boss on our list so far, and it is so on more than one level. For starters, we have an arena. It is really spacious grand hall with 2 rows of pillars that the bosses can destroy. This time those pillars not only add to the spectacle by being destroyed, they also serve an important role in a crowd control. By crowd control I mean controlling 2 bosses. You see, because there are 2 enemies from the very beginning of this fight, and unlike the Bell Gargoyles, both Ornstein and Smough are mostly close-range fighters, it is quite difficult to safely attack either of them. You can use pillars to try to separate them, and even cover from some of their attacks. The arena for once can be an extension of you, the player. It helps you during an encounter, not provide extra challenge like in many other fights. It kinda reminds me of the Fool's Idol and Phalanx arenas, but those were bosses with ranged attacks. And like I've said, here you use those pillars mostly for crowd control. As for aesthetics, again, as I've said in a previous episode, second act of Dark Souls 1 is a drastic change in tone. We go from the medieval Roman architecture of bridges and rooftops, mostly bridges, from demonic, long forgotten depths into Gothic palace, golden, bright, city of gods, and this clean royal arena shows that. The same applies to boss duo. One of them is Royal Knight, the other Royal Executioner. Royal. They are not demons, they are not corrupted in any way, at least they don't look like it. Their armors are well kept, golden like the city itself. It could be that they are the only, or at least the first, sane enemies you've encountered. From their perspective, they are protecting their princess from some undead barbarian. Well, Quelaag was kinda in the same position because she was protecting her sister, Fair Lady, but she was corrupted by Chaos Flame, so it wasn't exactly the same. Those 2 are living memorials of the Golden Age that ended Queen only knows how long ago, and they stand right in front of you, and you have to kill them. Well, technically you only need to kill one of them, but we'll get to that later. Or I forgot to explain it and you'll be mad at me in the comments. So, let's finally talk about the fight. It begins unlike any other duo boss fight we've talked about so far, with 2 enemies already present in the arena. They don't wait for the introduction like either of the Gargoyle duos. They both jump at you as soon as you enter the fog gate and the cutscene ends. Thankfully, one of them is considerably slower than the other. This is second unique characteristic of this duo boss fight. In Demon Souls, man-eaters were identical enemies. The Bell Gargoyles had slight differences. They worked together, but I won't repeat myself. Watch their episode to learn more. By the way, I want you to know that this video is a part of a series that focuses on analyzing From Software boss design. You probably already know that, but it really works best as a series. I pick up things mentioned in previous episodes. If some design trope, some trend is repeating in multiple fights, I probably only cover it once. So if you think I'm skipping some of the important elements of the boss fight design, it's likely that I've already talked about them in some of the previous episodes. Or not, it can be that I've just missed something. If so, you can let me know in the comments. Finishing this digression, that purpose wasn't to trick you into watching my other videos. I think that you can enjoy and maybe even learn something from watching this video alone, but I think it works the best as a series that you should watch from the beginning. Digression over. The second characteristic of this duo boss fight is the fact that Ornstein and Smough are polar opposites. This is the first instance of something like that in this series. Sure, you kinda had Tower Knight with the archers and the knight being nothing alike, also Capra Demon with its dogs, but I'd argue that it was different. You see, there you only had one enemy with a boss status, objectively awarded with this title by the obvious health bar. Ornstein and Smough are both boss enemies, no doubt in that. So, how do they differ? Ornstein is fast, relatively small. Smough on the other hand is huge and really slow. Ornstein's attacks are quick but don't deal that much damage. Each of Smough's hammer attacks have a certain heaviness to it. They are slow but they hit like a train. This makes sense. If you're fast, you probably don't wield the heaviest, most hard-hitting weapon, and if you're slow because you're heavy, you can use your body weight for extra damage. This comments and mirrors the player's decisions in a really subtle way. Most players that play melee either choose to invest in dexterity, hoping to master faster, swifter, more elegant weapons, or they invest in strength, that allows them to carry heavier weapons that, although are slower, hit like a train. Their movesets show those differences. Ornstein uses his lightning spear. Each of his attacks is precise. It has to be. Thrusting attacks have to be pointed directly at the opponent. Swings are more forgiving. Speaking of swings, he can also do some. Most of his combos combine swings with thrusts. Thrust, swing swing, or even swing swing ground slam. His moveset is really versatile. For example, in if a rough position, he will perform a swing evade. If he is too far, he can perform quite a few attacks from the distance. He can send you two types of projectiles, light and heavy lightning bolt. He can also very quickly charge at you. There are two variants of this move too, with and without lightning. He can quickly close the distance with the player. On his own, Ornstein would already be considered as a pretty complex boss, but as you can see, he's got some company. Smough intimidates the player with his height and width. He can do some standard swings and smashes using his hammer. They all hit, well, like a train, but are fairly well choreographed. He has two more unique attacks. Super powerful distance closing hammer charge and something that Vicky calls banzai drop. Both attacks are great and in my opinion add a certain heaviness to his personality, especially the banzai drop. He is super fat and he uses it as his advantage. In those attacks you have a visual and gameplay storytelling working together. You see that he is fat, but you also feel that through the gameplay when he uses his wave to slam you. This natural relation between visual and gameplay storytelling is what those games excel at. You don't have cutscene or dialogue exposition telling you one thing about the character and then in gameplay he doesn't match that description. Dark Souls is mostly really ludonarrative consistent. Miyazaki said that he never intended to make those games hard. Difficulty is just the part of the adventure. Ornstein and Smough are this game climax, no doubt in it. They're protecting what's left of the God's capital, they're protecting Guinevere, and probably most importantly, they are protecting the Lord Vessel. Lord Vessel is an item that is required to enter the end game locations, and it grants you the power of fast travel between certain bonfires. So it's kinda a big deal. Imagine if you could just walk past the Ornstein and Smough, or defeat them at ease. If there were no challenge, there would be no satisfaction of getting to the Guinevere and obtaining the Lord Vessel. You cannot accidentally defeat this boss duo. You have to show your knowledge of in-game mechanics, of its systems, and when you finally defeat them, after many failed attempts, you feel immense satisfaction. Well, at least that's what I felt. But as you can imagine, there are some flaws in this design philosophy. Not every player has the same skills, not every player is capable of the same reaction speed. What if this boss, this wall, is too thick to get through for some people? Well, the developers made sure that there are many systems, mechanics that can make this fight more accessible. For starters, you have giant blacksmith that can upgrade your gear, making your weapons and armor stronger. You can also use your humanities to kindle up the bonfire, increasing your Estus amount from 5 to up to 20. Of course, you can do that only if you killed Pinwheel previously, because now the only way out of Honor Londo is through Ornstein and Smough. But there is always a third way that can make your life easier. You can summon someone to help you. Of course, that means making yourself vulnerable to the Black Phantom attacks, but even if you're playing offline, there is still Solaire ready to help you. He even sits by the bonfire, so you can't really miss him. This video is pretty long compared to the previous episodes, but this is really complex boss. This is really important boss, so it is crucial to understand what makes this boss so memorable, what makes them stand out from countless other From Software bosses. Tell me in the comments if you preferred shorter or longer videos. Getting back to the fight. When you finally manage to defeat one of the bosses, something interesting happens. A cutscene plays. If you've killed Smough first, Ornstein will mourn his partner and then absorb his energy, his soul maybe? Then he grows stronger. His health bar resets and you fight again. This is the first boss in the whole series to have a second phase. Okay, some previous bosses had something that I will call soft second phase. Their attacks changed as the fight progressed, maybe the second enemy appeared, but this is the first instance of a clear separation that marked the beginning of a new phase. And it has two completely different second phases depending on the boss you killed first. If you manage to defeat Ornstein first, in the cutscene you will, well, let's just watch the cutscene. As you can see, Smough doesn't mourn his partner, he crushes him with his hammer. You can even see for a split second that Ornstein still has some life in him. To Smough, it doesn't matter, he absorbs his lightning power, his health bar resets and you know the drill. This is, again, a brilliant piece of subtle, non-verbal storytelling. You could have completely missed the slight hand twitch, but it shows just how brutal the Royal Executioner is. So technically, this fight has not one, not two, but 4 different bosses. Ornstein, Smough, Super Ornstein and Super Smough. I can only recall one other duo boss fight that does something similar, fight in which second phase changes depending on who you're gonna kill first. But like I've said, I will only compare bosses backwards. Tell me in the comments what boss am I talking about and get some extra points, I don't know. Super Ornstein is way bigger than his normal version. He gets Smough's strength after all and unlocks some new moves. He can now shoot heavy lightning bolts and can perform Smough's Banzai drop, this time with added lightning AoE. He also gets a grab attack, well, a stab grab to be more precise. Smough's moveset also changes a little. His hammer gets infused with lightning, his Banzai drop also gets a lightning AoE. Like I've said in the beginning, this is probably the most complex fight in the whole game, and still one of the most interesting encounters in the whole series. The unexpected twist to be a first fight to have a second phase, enemies evolving mid through it, the grandness of the setting, the lore-rich characters, the list goes on. Sure, after all these years, compared to Elden Ring, Sekiro or even Dark Souls 3, this boss has lost some of its charm. It isn't that difficult anymore if you've played those other games before, but I think that it still stands out among other bosses. Not many other fights are so complex and yet so well put together. It does something different with already established core gameplay elements, and most importantly, it is a predecessor of many other brilliant boss fights that at the time when Dark Souls 1 was just Dark Souls were yet to come. When killed, they will drop 50,000 souls, and depending on who is killed last, either Leo Ring and Soul of Ornstein, which can be turned into a Dragon Slayer spear, or Soul of Smough that you can turn into Smough's hammer. When it comes for the tips, well, maybe you have some good tips. Who do you usually finish off first? Whose super version do you prefer to fight? Tell me in the comments, or not, I guess. Anyways, thanks for watching. To the next time.